While the 2020 presidential election is right around the corner, my next guest is setting her sights a little further out. After more than a year of speculation, Boston City Councilor Michelle Wu announced last week she will run for mayor of Boston in 2020. As of the moment, she's the only candidate, as the incumbent recently told me he has made a decision but is not ready to reveal it. Michelle Wu joins me now. Councilor, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
So give us the 30-second version of your 2-minute announcement video. Why are you running?
I'm running for mayor of Boston because our city should be for everyone. We have the resources, we have the activism, we have the ideas. We just need bold, urgent leadership that lifts up our communities.
Am I right that you supported Marty Walsh in his first re-election bid?
That's correct.
What did he get right in his first 4 years that he got wrong in the next 3?
You know, over the last 7, 8 years, as Boston has gone through an incredible economic growth and success, we've seen that hasn't been shared across our city. And so in this moment, we are in crisis. It's the ongoing pandemic, an economic crisis, a national reckoning on systemic racism, our climate vulnerability. We need to be thinking about proactive, long-term leadership. We need to be closing the gaps in our city and using our resources to do that.
Speaking of one of those crises, I'm sure you saw the GBH poll that looked at the race. You had actually, just the last day of polling, you had made your announcement. The top concern by far, not surprisingly, of voters is COVID-19. 85% of the people polled said they either strongly or somewhat approved of the job the mayor was doing on the coronavirus. Are you among the 85% or not?
There's much to celebrate about how our city came together during this crisis and how people in leadership and in our community stepped up everywhere. We need to recognize that the issues that have been deepened and exposed during this pandemic were actually at crisis level for so many of our communities way before the pandemic as well. The disparities, the gaps in our school system, in access to housing stability, in the racial wealth gap, which has grown, in our planning process. All of these issues predated this pandemic and have needed leadership for some time.
What would you have done differently, if anything, during the 6 months, though, of this, different from what the mayor has done?
We have come together and done incredible work when it comes to addressing the immediate impacts of the crisis. But Boston can no longer afford Band-Aids and breadcrumbs. Every action of relief must also line up with a long-term vision and plan to address the long-standing challenges that have been facing our city. We can't see more dollars put to short-term improvements that will actually end up still exacerbating racial disparities and gaps across our neighborhoods and our communities.
Michelle, well, speaking of more dollars, you were a champion of free mass transit. You know much better than I that the T is suffering through hundreds of millions of dollars of shortfalls for obvious reasons. So is your push for free mass transit on pause during the economic part of this crisis, or no?
Public transportation is a public good, and we need to fund it that way and treat it that way. In fact, during the pandemic, the T made some changes that in the best interest of safety and economic supports for our residents by making the entire bus system free. We need to keep that up. They have recently reversed that decision, citing some funding difficulties, but there are resources available. Our Congresswoman, Ayanna Pressley, and Senator Ed Markey have filed federal legislation that would support fair, free transportation and expanding service with the lens of equity. We need to keep pushing for residents, particularly our essential workers who so rely on public transit, to have that safe, reliable, accessible, and affordable means to get to where they need to go.
In your announcement, you mentioned your immigrant parents. You, of course, are the first woman of color to be the president of the Boston City Council. How much should the race of the candidate be an issue for the voters next November?
This is not about any particular person or the idea that one person should be the face of our city at all. I'm running for mayor to lift up the stories, the struggles, the dreams of our communities. There are issues that we have been facing in our communities for decades and generations. The solutions are there, the resources are there. We need to empower everyone to be part of shaping our collective future.
Last week, a colleague of yours in the City Council was on Boston Public Radio, Andrea Campbell, and I asked her if she was contemplating running for mayor as well. Here's what she said.
I'm seriously considering it. If, I decide to do this, it will because I feel this moment demands a different type of leadership to finally eradicate systemic racism and the inequities we see across the city of Boston, and to have a clear focus on solving generational inequity in the city of Boston.
Sounds like another candidate in this race a little bit to me. What's your reaction to what Councilor Campbell had to say?
I have tremendous respect for my colleague and know that this race, this campaign is about the residents. It's about the issues that we could solve together, and emphasizing that in this moment of crisis, it is not only possible to reimagine what Boston could be doing and how we could be going about our toughest challenges, it is absolutely necessary to solve them to make sure that our residents, our next generation, will have the opportunity to thrive in this city.
Michelle Wu, good luck to you. I hope we see you a lot in the next year plus.
Thanks so much, Jim.